Welcome to Authors at Drucker. I'm Dave Specht, Director of the Global Family Business Institute at the Drucker School of Management. At the Drucker School, we aspire to become the global meeting place for the world's most influential business-owning families. And today's conversation is evidence that we're making progress. Authors at Drucker is an interview series where we feature top authors that write about issues impacting business-owning families. Authors at Drucker is made possible from the generous sponsorship of the James E. Hughes Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to advancing the study of family governance and generational well-being. And we at the Drucker School feel very aligned and very grateful to Jay and his foundation. Last month, we heard from one of Seth's friends, Whitney Johnson, about her book, Disrupt Yourself. And if you missed it, please go back to the website and we have a recording for you there. And let me just briefly share my screen. I have one other announcement. That is the man of the hour, Seth Godin. I will introduce him in just a second. Two other things I'm excited about. We have a certificate program that's recently launched in advising family enterprises. If you're a part of an organization that advises family enterprises and you want to be more strategic about how to do that well at the intersection of the financial and non-financial lives that they're leading, please feel free to reach out and we can talk about that. One other thing I'm really excited about at the Drucker School is the Generational Wealth Masterclass that is coming soon and ready to launch. And if you want to hear more about that, please feel free to reach out and I will share information on it. So without further ado, we will get to the man of the hour, which is Seth Godin. And I want to just quickly introduce him. He's someone that everyone on this call probably already knows, but Seth is a 20-time best-selling author. Amazing. Some of his books include Tribes, Purple Cow, Linchpin, on and on and on. He has one of the longest running and most read blogs on the internet with close to 9,000 posts. Seth's the founder of Akimbo, home of the Alt MBA. I love Seth's description of himself. He simply says that he's a teacher and he does projects. I love that simplicity, Seth. And Seth's TED Talks have been viewed by millions of people. And what I love about Seth is that he is prolific and is committed to shipping his work, which is something that I feel like he's always encouraging of us to do. And so Seth, thank you so much for joining us at Authors at Drucker.
What a treat. Thank you. You had me at Drucker, but then when I got to interact with you, I was really excited to be here. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Seth. So today I want to focus on the Song of Significance. And maybe you can help us. 100 lucky people actually got copies of your book in advance. And some of them have read, but some of those that are joining us today have not yet read it. And so we're gonna tease it a little bit, and then we're gonna encourage them to go get it. So in your book, The Song of Significance, we talk a little bit about bees and the Song of Increase. Can you give us a little insight as to that inspiration, the inspiration of the bees and the work of Jacqueline Freeman to this work?
So Jacqueline's a feral beekeeper. She's not feral. The bees are feral. And one of the things that feral bee colonies do, wild bee colonies, is in the Northern Hemisphere, if they've made it to May, that's pretty much a miracle. The purpose of the honey is not to make the beekeeper happy. It's to give the hive enough resources to make it through the winter. And if the hive has made it that far, the Council of Maidens, which are the influencers within the hive, will meet and do a few things. They'll encourage the queen to lay and fertilize a queen egg. And they will also let all the other bees know that they should collect as much pollen as they possibly can. And it's interesting because it lines up with when the flowers need that very thing to happen. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, they will collect and convert enough pollen to replace all of the honey in the hive. And the baby queen will begin to come to maturity. There's only enough room in a hive for one queen. And then what will happen on a day when the bees know the weather is going to be okay is more than 10,000 bees will leave the hive in a 5 or 10 minute period of time. They will all swarm, never to return, leaving behind all the honey, all the babies. They're just leaving. That sound that they make is the song of increase, the leap into the void, that feeling that this might not work, but it's what we have to do right now. And when I heard that story, that term, it just lit me up and helped me understand that for too many of us, we have been lulled into a sense of ennui or security or stuckness. But what we yearn for is a different kind of song.
Yeah. And you'll have to forgive me because everything that I hear, I end up applying to family business because that's the lens through which I'm looking.
That's why we're here.
And as I think about this story and the bees, and I think about these courageous transitions, I think about these families that are choosing to perpetuate their business from one generation to the next. And it's scary. It's scary for them to leave a leader that has been a figurehead and say someone else can also lead. So I don't know if you have any specific applications where you feel like this is germane to family-owned businesses, but if you do, I'd love to hear it.
30 years ago, about 35 years ago, my dad bought a 100-year-old hospital crib company in a very small leverage buyout. He had to take it through bankruptcy twice. It's the dominant maker of hospital cribs in the world. In Buffalo, New York, they bend steel with a UAW workforce and make an actual high utility item. And as my dad got older, I was helping him find someone who would buy the business. But as often happens in generational shifts, he felt like selling the business would be akin to giving up and fading away. So he stuck with it probably longer than he should have, as he was challenged by mental issues. And after he passed away, my sister raised her hand and said, I will do this. I will step up because I want to, because I am capable of bringing my expertise to build this in a different way. And so I've seen this firsthand. I've seen what can happen when it's working beautifully, and I've seen what can happen when it brings unneeded tension to the table. And so the work that you're doing at the Institute feels to me like the most important part, which is having a conversation about it. And that's what my book is about. It's about having a conversation about what we seek to do.
Thank you so much for leading with vulnerability. You're so good at that. So at the beginning of the book, it talks about these three songs: the song of increase, the song of safety, and the song of significance. I wonder if you could just kind of briefly describe those three, and then we'll make some applications along the way.
Well, we just talked about the song of significance. The song of safety is where so many family-owned businesses are stuck. Yeah. And it is, how do I fight change and maintain the status quo? Because the status quo is what I'm comfortable with, and change is a threat. And the song of significance is the opposite of that. The song of significance is, where do I light up? What is the change that I seek to make? That when we do something that might not work, when we lean into possibility and opportunity, that is when we are meeting our potential. And whoever started your family business all those years ago did not start it so that you could spend your life singing the song of safety. That having a job where you feel insecure and where you are fighting to maintain a status quo is no way to live your life.
Yeah, I love it. So talk about so again, in these transitions, I feel like it takes so much courage for all involved, really. It takes courage for a leader to let go. It takes courage for a rising generation to raise their hand. Like, there's courage all along the way. Yep. I think the popular media does a disservice to family-owned businesses by saying that only startups are innovative, which I don't believe is true. If you don't innovate, you die. And so I think family businesses sometimes get a bad rap that way. But I want to talk about this fear of becoming insignificant. You talked about it with your dad. The book is the song of significance, but sometimes it's a leader that worries about, that fears becoming insignificant, whether in the minds of their family or their community, that keeps them frozen in time. So what do we do? What do we do for them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I want to take a second to talk about hyphens. I wrote a blog post about apostrophes, but this is more important than that. In the notes you sent me, you wrote business owning families, and you wrote business owning families. And I read it not the way you wrote it, because you left the hyphen out. You didn't say families that own businesses. You wrote businesses that own families. And I think that that's really, really instructive to understand that we have all come from a multi-hundred-year tradition of work being the way we feed our family, work being the way we find health and a roof over our head. And then industrialists and culture created a narrative that work is life, and it is where we're going to find our connection and our meaning. And so if you're the matriarch, if you're the founder, if you're the person who showed up and has equated work, the business, with family, it's super easy to miss the hyphen and to come to the conclusion that the business owns the family, not that the family owns the business. So where I begin is we have to ask two questions. We have to ask, who's it for and what's it for? Who exactly are we here to serve? And what is the change we seek to make? And I don't think the media is tarring family-owned businesses with a lack of innovation. I think they're targeting any business that chooses to maintain the status quo. So, watching Microsoft take a huge leap into AI, they're a massive organization and they changed a lot. Whereas you take a look at, Barnes and Noble, and they're like fading fast. Bed Bath & Beyond is gone. So it's this decision. Who exactly are we here for? And what is the change we seek to make? And the problem in a family-owned business is A, it gets left unsaid, and B, it's often in conflict. There are people in a family-owned business who are saying, how do I get my share? I'm entitled to this. Why don't people respect me? And those are inward-facing things about who's it for. It's for me. And if we're going to have that dynamic in a business where someone who has a significant leadership/ownership stake is saying, this is for me, well, it's very challenging to figure out where the organization is going, because every single shift in the world that doesn't satisfy that desire feels like a threat. Whereas, if we think about the great artists in any field, including business, they don't look at life like golf, where it's how do I cut one more stroke? How do I get closer to perfect? They look at it like surfing. And the thing about surfing is every wave is going to be different for every surfer. That's the point. And a world surfing champion, Kelly, built a surf ranch in California. And what he did was he flooded a farm and installed, in this order, he built a train track, put a train in, an actual locomotive, flooded a farm, and then put a snowplow in front of the truck, the locomotive. And they drive the locomotive. It's powerful enough. It moves millions of pounds of water into a perfect wave. And then there's a whole bleacher section. So pro surfers could come and surf the same real actual wave over and over again. What's interesting about it is most surfers don't spend a lot of time there, because that's not what surfing is for. And I believe that a business run well is surfing. It's not golf.
Love that. I love that. So one of the challenges, again, that business owning family-owned businesses have, and leaders in those family businesses, is oftentimes identities are so wrapped up in the product that they make that there's this great fear that they as a person are somehow going to become obsolete if they are not leading that business. And it paralyzes them. So I in those transitions, I'm trying to help them figure out, like, how do you move towards something rather than feel like you're just leaving something behind? Do you have any thoughts on that? In terms of, in the bees, they're pursuing something, like they're actively going and they're not looking back, right? So any thoughts on that? The pursuit of what's next, or the pursuit of ambitious pursuit of whatever, really. But
so if you own the business, you are entitled to stay for as long as you want. But if you are going to be the generous, thoughtful, empathic leader of the family, you should quit. You should quit your job. You should quit your job too soon, not too late, because it is selfish to last even one day too late. And you have to look deep into who you are, what you stand for in order to quit. Because if the only thing you are is this business, that's sort of sad.
Yeah.
And if you believe that you are the only person who can run this business, I don't think you've built a very good business. I think you're a freelancer with assistants. And there's nothing wrong with being a freelancer with assistants, but then don't pretend it's a family-owned business. It's a freelance gig with assistants. So if that's what it is, don't treat it like a family business. Run it till you're done and then walk away. But the mistake we make is being greedy about holding on to every scrap, because where the real joy lies is in knowing, you mentioned Akimbo and the Alt MBA. I don't own it. I don't run it. I have no involvement in it. I don't get any money from it and haven't for more than 2 years, because my employees set up a B Corp. I set them up to succeed or fail. And then I said, thank you. I got to go build something new. That was thrilling. Could I have taught more people and built more of those sorts of things? Of course I could. But is that my role? Is that what I signed up to do? Find a job and do it over and over again? Because once you're privileged enough to be on this call, once you're privileged enough to not worry about paying your rent, well, then what are you going to do with it? And it feels to me like a key part of the conversation is to say, what's better for my family, for my customers, for the change I seek to make in my limited time around here? And it generally is, if you're beginning to ask that question, you already know the answer. The answer is you should quit.
Courageous. So your book is really a manifesto on teams and how people in teams find significance. I wanted you to talk about, what role having a defined purpose plays in achieving a culture of significance.
Okay, so purpose is very tricky. And my friend Simon Sinek and I argue about this all the time. When a committee of people comes up with their purpose statement or a mission statement, it's almost always completely disposable and useless, because Johnson and Johnson's purpose is to enable human health, but it doesn't guide any of their decision making. What generally guides their decision making is, will this make my boss happy, and will it make the stock price go up? That's their purpose, and that's what they do all day. So let's be clear about what your purpose actually is, because if it's not guiding difficult decisions, then it's not your purpose. And if I am thinking about how can I point to my work, my body of work, the millions of words, what I am trying to measure is, am I helping people teach other people ideas that they think are worthwhile? If something I'm writing or doing isn't going to do that, it doesn't meet the standard of what I'm trying to put into the world. So when they asked me to audition for Shark Tank, I said, no, thank you. The world doesn't need a mean judge, and the world isn't going to learn anything from me entertaining folks like that. So it doesn't match my structure for what's worth my time. It may be that what you're measuring is, can we add another zero to the money we have at Goldman Sachs? Okay, fine, but say it. And then that will guide your difficult decisions. And inside the family, if you're like almost every family I've ever encountered, a lot is left unsaid. And while that is true at work in general, at least at work in general, one boss, one leader can force people to say what's up, right? When you apply for a job, this is what we do around here, in or out. You don't get to do that in the family business. It's really hard to get rid of crazy cousin Steve. And we have to have the conversation. So if we can have the difficult conversation just one time, we can open the door for who wants what from who and why. And that's why organizations like yours matter so much. That's why everybody I know who's in a family business, I encourage to go to therapy for it. I am part peripherally of a 4-generation family. I'm not related, but I help of a summer camp in Canada where I've been for 43 summers, watching them get to the fourth generation and the place is running better now than it has ever run. That was intentional. That just didn't happen.
Beautiful. One of the unique challenges that many of our families face is integrating the rising generation into the business, the timing of it, like how do they, is a job created for them or do they apply for one? As I think about the bees again, like how they know what their roles are and who's doing what and who's going where. How do we help individuals find their role, or is it 100% their responsibility to find their role? I'm curious your take on this.
These are great questions. I'm glad I didn't look at them in advance. If you talk to someone who has built a family business and you ask them what was satisfying about it, in my experience, it's that it wasn't easy, but they learned to do it with ease, to lean into a problem that was very hard and worth solving. That the stories that we tell about that journey are often stories of bad luck or hardship, and then perseverance and insight and success. That lights up the kind of person who tends to build an organization. And then that person, in their kindness, turns around and creates a padded cell for their next generation and says, you don't get to experience any of those things. You just have to do the job. And that is one of the reasons you need to quit. But the other thing you can do, if you believe that that is what it is to be alive, is you can start a division, whatever it is, a new project, something that sits next to what you already do. Because it is that ability with a safety net, but not too big a safety net, to find a new customer, change their life, figure out how to make enough money doing it to be able to do it again. That is what creates an organization that will persist with resilience. And it feels to me like the expectation that you will be hired to do a job, even if you are not the best person to do that job, is what leads to the toxicity and eventual demise of so many family businesses. Because that's not what the person who in the previous generation signed up for, and that's not what your customers want either.
Yeah. I had a learning recently. I used to say that family business transitions, family business success across generations work when there's a shared dream. That's false. I just learned that that's false. There's no such thing as a shared dream. I believe that in each successive generation, they need to find their own dream, and it may have to do with the company that they run. One family ran a aviation sales company. Well, the second generation wasn't good at sales, and so they completely reinvented the business, and now it's the largest aviation maintenance company in the world. And it worked, Seth. It worked, but it worked because they pursued their own dream. It happened to be connected, and I love that. I love that concept. So you talk about projects quite a bit, and I want to. I think there's a real challenge, especially with students that are coming out of grad school or undergrad, and there's all this tension about finding the dream, finding the right job, finding the right work, something that I can do forever. And I feel like there's unnecessary pressure, and it paralyzes them. And especially those that are considering coming back to the family business, because it feels like, am I coming back or am I not? And it's not. Anyways, so talk to me about the beauty of living a project-focused life rather than find a job you can do forever.
Well, one thing I will tell you, having spent a lot of time with people in their 20s, is this idea of the forever job is really fading, and it's fading fast. But Pressfield's resistance is always at the heart of so much of this. Steve Pressfield's book, The War of Art. Anything that keeps us from leaning into productive, creative, generous work is resistance. So writer's block, which doesn't exist, is resistance. It gets made up by someone who's afraid to be seen. That in a few minutes, we're going to ask people to post their questions in the chat. They can start right now. Everyone who's on this call has a question. Not everyone who's on this call is going to type something into the chat. That's resistance. I can point to resistance all over the place. And when you're $250,000 in debt, or great grandpa put you through school, there's a lot of reasons to feel resistance. And you don't want to go home for Thanksgiving and say, oh yeah, I got a job. I'm working at a farm stand 3 days a week, because everyone's going to think you're a loser. So you end up with this cycle of paralysis instead of a cycle of generosity. And the cycle of generosity is super simple. Find the smallest viable audience and the smallest viable product, and bring a project to someone who appreciates it. Make a difference in their life. Be a volunteer nurse, a candy striper, whatever it is. Did you make someone's day different today? Can you do it again tomorrow? There's no chance you're going to have this job in 10 years. That's a given. In 10 years, the earth is going to be half underwater. Who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? What we know is that today you have a chance to do a project, to put your name on it, to be able to say, here, I made this. And too often, because we've indoctrinated people into the industrial mindset, we insulate people from that and say, nope, you're just a cog in this system. Here's your cubicle. Here's your to-do list, but you don't have to be responsible. I think that's a waste.
When did you first discover that, Seth? And how did you start just going? Because you probably weren't born that way, were you? Knowing
no one
that
is born
clarity.
This way. I won the parent lottery, but I have many peers who lost the parent lottery. So I give my parents all the credit, but I'm not sure that parents who, for whatever reason, couldn't do it deserve all the blame. We've seen people be able to figure this out. I started my first entrepreneurial project when I was 14. When I was in college, I co-ran the largest student-run business in the country, and I launched a new division every week. And we had a ticket bureau and a birthday cake service and a travel agency and a snack bar and a temporary employment agency and a dry cleaning service and on and on and on. And I didn't make any money from it. That's why it worked. I got paid $50 a week, and I just, let's start a new thing. Once human beings start doing projects, they discover the satisfaction of making a difference. So there's a difference, I think, between following the Regent's curriculum and reading the lecture notes and showing up in class and saying, these 6 kids are going to understand fractions by the time I'm done today. That second one is a project. And once you've done it, you want to do it again. So I was lucky that my parents pushed me to do that. But I know lots of people who didn't start this till their 20s or their 30s or their 50s. But once you can figure out how to make appropriately sized projects, and in this world it's easier than ever, you can do it again.
Okay, I want to pause and I want to encourage and lovingly nudge questions from our audience. Seth is more interested in your questions than he is mine. He's going to be kind and take mine, but he really wants yours. So please start to submit those. This call exists to serve you guys, so don't let me hog it all. So please submit your questions. As you were talking about that, I was thinking of something that has made a difference in my life, and I call this walking on. I had an experience in college that I wanted to play basketball, and I wasn't good enough for someone to say, Dave, I want to give you a scholarship. So I walked on. And anyone that knows what a walk-on is someone that chooses themselves, is not financially rewarded, and is doing it because they love it. And I love the concept, and I feel like it applies to the work that you're helping us to do here is walk on, like do something that you really care about for you, and see what happens. And I learned so much about myself by choosing myself and not waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, you're chosen. And
well, first, a tiny rant, which is, why isn't every single sports experience in college like that? Why on earth are we using money to pay people who should be learning something for life to hurt themselves playing a sport for money when that's not the purpose of the institution. But leaving that aside, this idea of the walk-on can be extended one step further. A family friend always wanted to be an actor. He got into an Ivy League school. He applied for the improv troupe. And he was heartbroken to discover that there were only 10 spots and he ranked 11th. And I said, Ben, it's the improv troupe. Start your own improv troupe. He couldn't figure out how to do it. He couldn't see himself as somebody who would put up some flyers and say, want to join my improv troupe. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the day he failed as an actor. Because you get to walk on anywhere you want. You don't have to be on the team. You can start the team. And so many small businesses figured that out.
Okay, we have a few questions coming in. I'm going to pause on mine.
Do.
We are going to ask some people to join their voice to our conversation. Wanja, if you would like to ask your question, please join us. And Allison, if you would spotlight her, that would be great.
Thank you, Dave. Seth, wonderful to be here and just to be, to connect you with all the things that I see, Udemy and, all these platforms. It's really great. So my question is, how do you treat entrepreneurial failure? And it's something that's also quite significant when it comes to family enterprise, because if a family is taking on an entrepreneurial orientation, and not every family member has the same skills, aptitude for success in whatever it is that they're taking on, you put family capital at risk, it doesn't work out. How do you address that? Because it could also be quite psychologically difficult. Yeah.
This is a great question. Thank you, Anja. So I've taught thousands of people how to juggle. And it's very interesting because high performers who don't know how to juggle tend to say, oh yeah, I can juggle. And here, give me the balls. And they go, throw it. And pretty quickly, they're on the ground. And the way they ended up being on the ground is you lunge to catch a ball that's over here, and now you're out of position to catch the other one, and they're going to drop. That's because high-performing people in family businesses and such think that juggling is about catching. Because if you've ever seen a juggler and you're a decent human being, you are willing for them to catch the balls. That's how we measure juggling. Juggling isn't about catching at all. It's about throwing. If you get good at throwing, the catches take care of themselves. So when I teach juggling, I spend 40 minutes and all we do is throw. There's no catching whatsoever for the first 40 minutes. If you get good at throwing, the catches take care of themselves. So entrepreneurial failure for me, and I was like close to bankruptcy for 12 years. It was a very thin line for a very long time. I'm not saying that I enjoyed it, but what enabled me to make it through was to realize I wasn't being rejected, my project was. And B, I had learned another way not to throw. But bending myself into knots to catch would have broken me. And so what we have the opportunity to do is to create a situation where our family can learn to throw without bankrupting us. And that means creating appropriately sized projects where there can be 6 of them that don't work, and we're fine, as long as somebody is learning from the process and not destroying trust as they do. And too often, because arrogance sits right next to fear, people show up in a situation like that and don't learn anything from their failures. They just blame the system or their customers. We've got to cut through that, but we've got to figure out, how are we going to get there? How are we going to learn to write copy? How are we going to learn to do strategy? How are we going to identify customers who have a problem? How do we do that over and over and over again? And keep track of the failures with pride. Because if you can't show me your failures, I'm not sure I believe you've tried as hard as you say you did.
Wanja, thank you for asking that question. And I love the juggling analogy. That might be the main thing I remember from the call, Seth. Thank you. Bruce has a question. Bruce, do you want to join your voice to the call and ask Seth your question?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. This is great, Seth. So yeah, I just wanted to see how you relate the project mindset to your own publishing ventures, because not like I know a lot about your publishing ventures, but I do know you've done some self-publishing. I know you've been with different traditional publishers. I remember back in the 2019 ATD conference, I got a free copy of a large size book on education. So if you could speak to that a bit, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. So I used to be a book packager. I'll show you what that means. I worked with Walter Dean Myers to create a series of novels for Black kids who had been overlooked. I did this book with bestselling author Chip Conley in '86. I did this book over here before the internet. This was the internet. This was a mammoth undertaking. What do book packagers do? Well, that's where I got to professionalize my project management things. You go to a book publisher and you say, I see a hole in the market, and for a small advance, a couple $100,000, I can make this thing and maybe it'll sell. And I did 120 books that way, never missed a deadline, never went over budget. Because the rule is, when you run out of time, you run out of money, you're done. There's always a line. And that's why they call it a deadline. I don't want to go near it because that's the other side, you're dead. Not an option. So it begins with, what does this idea need to solve the problem I seek to solve? What is it for? Who can be reached by this idea? So if I can take 400 words and reach 1 million people, well, that's a blog post. On the other hand, if I need to reach teachers and parents all over the world who don't read my blog, well, then I'm going to need a TEDx talk and an 80,000 word manifesto and a website and all those other things, because that's the container to reach people. Sometimes you need to get paid to do something because a whole bunch of people are associated with it. So spent a year and a half as a volunteer organizing this, the most important book of my career. And we spent every penny of our advance to bring the book to the world and promote it. I needed the advance so that I could bring the book to the world. So I'm very focused on, does this fit the bucket that I can go get? And to pick, an example I learned from my dad, the thing about a 100-year-old hospital crib company with a UAW workforce in Buffalo, New York, is there's a lot of spare parts. And there's a lot of rusted stuff. And there's just, acres of old stuff. And what was happening was the work in progress and process was getting too high, and it was slowing everything down. And my dad spent 6 months researching and got a CNC machine. And I'm sure our co-working space friend, I'm sorry, I just forgot your name. Here is Rob, could explain to me what this machine is. But he would program it at night, and they'd come in the morning, and all the screws and bolts and everything they needed for the day had been made that night from steel. And that project created an asset. That asset enabled big flexibility going forward. So I'm always thinking about this. I don't say, I have a customer, how do I make them happy? I say, what's the change I seek to make? Which customer do I need to get as a stepping stone to the change I seek to make? So that was a great question. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Our next question is a friend from Canada, Tracy. If you'd like to join your voice to the call, you want to talk about shiny object syndrome, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Excellent. Thank you guys for this beautiful call. I really appreciate it. So I am an agriculture media publisher in Canada, and I've been doing that for 15 years. I started a video podcast show 5 years ago for my ag media platform. Dave's been a guest multiple times. I am curious, and you touched on this a few times already, Seth. I am your typical entrepreneur, shiny object, and I can't shut it off. Yesterday, I finally said, shut it all off, Tracy, and focus. And then I heard something you said, and I'm like, I'm curious, Seth's thoughts on balancing multiple projects and things on the go, because of course we have so many voices giving their opinions. Others are like, shut it off, focus on one thing, but I can't seem to shut it off. And I know you touched on this already. So if you want to add, go ahead. If not, I
this is
think
great.
this is great job.
I need to ask you a couple questions first. And I'm sorry about the feedback loop. It looks like you're in Ontario, but your accent makes me think you're not. Where are you?
I am Manitoba. I am
Okay, there you go. Yes.
sitting on my ranch.
Next question. How many people are in your organization?
Pretty small. I keep it pretty thin. I have outsourced website, outsourced a lot of stuff, and I have a couple main staff.
Right. Got it. Okay. So I play with words for a living, and I think it's really important to understand that there's a difference between an entrepreneur and a freelancer. And I am proudly a freelancer. I used to be an entrepreneur, but I'm a freelancer. And the difference is this. Entrepreneurs often use other people's money, but they always build an asset bigger than themselves, an asset that enables them to build value when they're asleep and that they could sell and their customers would be okay with that, right? That being an entrepreneur is a process, a commitment. It's something that you do on purpose. A freelancer, someone who gets paid when they work. If a freelancer says, Dave, will you be a guest on my podcast? And it's just the two of you, right? That you are creating media value and you have a real business. I'm not saying you don't have a business, but owning the fact that you are the core of the institution is a breakthrough, because now you realize your job is not to work for the workers. Your job is to work for what lights you up and what keeps the cash flow coming so you can do it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so feel no shame about shiny objects. If you were Tim Cook, I would say, hey, Tim, grow up. You're running the most valuable company in the world. You're not entitled to go start a little project that makes welcome mats because you feel like it. That's not what the shareholders signed up for. But Tracy, if you want to go chase a shiny object and you can make the project fit into your universe, please do. And the time we spend beating ourselves up because we're not Tim Cook is wasted, right? If you want to be Tim Cook, go be Tim Cook. You know how, but that's not what you want. So don't do that.
Ooh, Seth, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Permission granted. I love that. Thanks, Seth.
Nice.
All right. Let's see here. Cynthia, do you want to go next about your question? Cynthia Molina.
Sure.
Thank you. I was worried you were going to skip Cynthia. I'm glad she got in.
Thanks so much, Seth. I'm just delighted to hear your perspective. So I wonder about natural calling and the degree to which projects you've engaged in have felt really aligned with your calling and you felt great about them. Which ones have made the most difference to you and the least difference, and the most difference to the world and the least difference?
There's so many layers to this.
That's a tough question.
One of my first jobs was as a game designer. I built a game that ran on a mainframe computer in 1977. I built the most popular online game in the world in 1991. And part of me gets an enormous amount of satisfaction out of seeing something that feels like a game to me, bringing a strategy to it or the game itself to the world and seeing that it worked, right? This project was ill-advised and very risky because it's very hard to put a book in a milk carton. And we only made 10,000 of them, but there aren't very many things on my desk, and this is one of them because it was hard and we did it. On the other hand, I've done other projects that were insanely profitable on a per hour basis, and they enabled me to do the other stuff. I don't spend a lot of time trying to repeat that, but obviously the marketplace said, you get a check for that. When I did these books with Walter Dean Myers, and I heard from the kids in my neighborhood, one of the successfully integrated neighborhoods outside of New York, that this book changed the way they were in the world. It didn't matter to me that the series of books didn't sell very many copies, because that wasn't what it was for. So I guess what I would say is this: the worst projects by far are the ones where the people I was working with and had no choice but to work with were jerks. And I have gone to great lengths to not have that happen again. And I still carry around trauma from some of the jerks I've had to work with. No project I've worked on has made the jerk part worth it. On the other hand, there are projects where I didn't seek to maximize shareholder value. And I have a little bit of regret about that, but not a lot. And mostly the regret I have, I can say without error, is the projects I didn't do. The things where I looked at injustice or possibility or something that needed doing, and I blinked and I said, I'm not capable or I'm too busy. I regret that. And so I'm trying to make up for lost time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Cynthia.
Thanks, Seth. Okay, Naveen is next. And I'll take a first run at this one, Seth, if that's okay.
Sure.
How can we sail from a safe monthly paying job to an uncertain business? And I will quote my brother-in-law on this, and this is something he got from somewhere else. So he says, choose your hard. If you have something you want to do and having to go to that job that you hate, choose your hard. If it's harder for you to forego income than it is to chase down that thing, then you do it. But anyways, how would you respond to that?
So for more than 10 years, as I said, the prospect of getting a job as a bank teller was hanging over my head like a scythe. That I only needed to have no income for a period of time, and then I was out. Couldn't play the game anymore. And so the watchword for me is you can't get thrown out of the game. And I have never suggested to anyone that they should quit their, quote, safe monthly paying job, bet everything on the uncertain thing. I think that it's unresilient, and I don't want my fingerprints on that. What I say to people is, even if you have a really busy job, you still have 8 hours free on the weekend. So in that 8 hours, if you've got that thing that you have an itch to do, go show me customer traction. Go show me that you can start small and find customers who say, yes, you made a difference in my life. And if you can't do it in 8 hours a weekend, you're not going to be able to do it if you go all in. It's resistance again. It's dreaming of this perfect world where some magical person comes and invests all this money, and then you can go finally do the thing you dream of. That never works. I think that what works is showing yourself that when you have the chance to turn off Netflix and turn off social media and actually build a thing, other people appreciate it. Build the smallest thing you can think of. Doesn't matter. Just build a thing and sell a thing. And if it works, do it again.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Let's go to Allie. Allie, do you want to come on and ask your question to Seth?
Sure. First, Dave, thank you so much. This has been great. And Seth, I appreciate your wisdom. So what is the most successful strategy that you've seen for injecting innovation into a stagnant organization, particularly a family business that's really tied to stories of the past?
Right. That's a great question. Let's think about what people sign up for. If you look at the folks who are in a Broadway show, after the Broadway show runs for a certain period of time, they start to leave the show. Why? They have a steady gig, finally. Well, that's why. Because they didn't sign up for a steady gig. They signed up for the thrill of, can I learn this? Can I get the part? Can I enjoy it? And now I have a short attention span, I want to go do the next thing. Whereas if I go down the street to Hartford, Connecticut, and talk to people who work at Aetna, why did you sign up to work here? Well, they might babble on about healthcare and stuff, but really what they signed up for was a safe job in a bureaucracy so they can go home at the end of the day and not worry about it. So if you've got a stagnant, let's call it stable family business, most of the people who are there signed up for that. And when you show up and say, guess what? Things are changing around here. They don't applaud. They do everything they can to get it back to being the safe job. So the problem isn't the business. The problem is the desires and intent of the people who are there. And for me, the solution is really simple, which is that place across the street that's been up for rent for so long, start a second project and invite people who want to go on that journey to sit across the street and go do that thing. Because enrollment is the key to the whole thing. That you have a brand, for sure. You have loyal customers, for sure. But just because you have those things doesn't mean you get to innovate and have it work if your people aren't signed up to go on that journey. And I don't think we can criticize those people for doing what we said we wanted them to do. Because when we hired them, we said, this is a safe, stable bureaucracy. This is your job. We didn't say, every day, something different's going to happen here, and you're going to have to shift where you sit every 2 months, and every 6 months, we're giving you a new job title. And I mean, if we had been saying that all along, then we could say, no, you don't know how to do this job because you're not doing those things. But we signed up for one thing and now you're changing it. So go find people who want to sign up for the new thing. Maybe it's the same person, but it's probably not.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up question, if that's okay, Dave.
Sure, go for it.
So that really goes to the mindset of the people involved and them feeling a sense of agency to be able to exit and start that new thing. In a family business, oftentimes they've been socialized to stay and not leave. Have you seen anything? I really like the concept of empowerment and freedom. As the first generation with our second generation, how do we give them freedom to leave without fear or shame?
Yeah. So I don't have firsthand experience with this, but I've been talked to by a few people who do. There are Amish communities where when the kid hits 19, they have to go to the city for a year. They have to. And then if they come back, they're part of the community with all the rules and all the structure. And if they don't, they don't. And if I don't have a family business, I have intentionally kept my kids out of the public spotlight, and they're not welcome to buy copyrights or anything that I do. But if I did have a family business, there's no doubt in my mind I would require them to go do a thing for a long period of time and then come back if they want. And that is so hard to do as a parent, but so important.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Ali, I would also add, for a family business, I think resource allocation towards new is healthy as well. And I don't think it happens very often. We want to be innovative, but we only invest in the things that we've done in the past. So I think there's an opportunity to shift family business mindset if there is an actual allocation of resources and time that are dedicated to innovation and breaking stuff and trying stuff. So that, I don't know, whatever that's worth.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Keep those questions coming. I'm gonna jump to one of mine, Seth. I want to talk about these markers that you talk about. The markers that we might use to measure if a culture of a company is fostering significance in that workplace. And you talk about a number of them, of these markers. And I don't know if you want to just grab one or two, but
bring it to me because I didn't memorize it.
Okay. So one, humans are not a resource. Another one that kind of called to me was seek out useful imposters. Talk to us about that. I just want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right. So I made a 5-pack of the book, and it comes with 25 of these. And the idea of this is if you hand this out into your organization, because people aren't going to read a whole book, and their eyes glaze over in fear, now you know you have a problem. And I listed all of them on this page. And basically, what I'm saying is when the boss shows up and says, hold me to these principles, and I'm going to hold you to them. Let's get real or let's not play. It's exactly the same thing that happens if Vasco da Gama is getting a whole bunch of people to be on the boat. Like if you're the sailor on the boat, you're not allowed to complain about being seasick because that's one of the principles. We're sailors. That's what we do around here. So if you're going to start one of these innovative offshoots, it's, we criticize relentlessly the work. We never criticize the worker. That dignity is a requirement of the way that we do things around here. That you have to do the reading. You can't just show up and say, because I said so. That There's a difference between the attitude of we get to do this versus we have to do this. We built the entire Carbon Almanac. Everyone was a volunteer. I wasn't in charge of anybody. We made a 97,000 word book with 300 people in 40 countries in 5 months without one significant error. And we did it based on these principles, because all I could do was say, if you're not following these principles, you can't be here. But that's it. That's everything else is going to be a mutual engagement. We are here to create something significant. You don't have to do it. You're still going to be able to feed your family. Do you want to do this or not? This is what good looks like. And when something isn't good, we're not going to say you're a bad person. We're going to say, how do we make this better? And that posture is how you built the family business in the first place, but you forgot all of it because you've shifted to how do we maintain as opposed to how do we change?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that we begin to personalize things that shouldn't be personal. And you talk about one of the things is it's about the work, or it's the work, not the worker. And if we know what work we're signing up for, we will quickly figure out if we're an asset or if we're a liability to that work. And if we can be honest about that, then we have a chance.
Yeah, exactly right. And family is tough to begin with, but family, when you have the metrics of a business right next to it,
Yeah.
wow, it's hard.
It's difficult. Okay, let's go back to the chat for one question here. This is from Corey. Corey, do you want to join us with your voice on the call? And if not, I can go ahead and ask the question.
All right, turn your radio down. Go ahead, read Corey's question.
All right. How can we encourage the rising generation to not define themselves by their failures and take those leaps early in life? To me, this is an identity question. And what do, are we identified by our failures early?
Well,
what do you think, Seth?
Let's think, not having seen any of your parenting moments, let's think about what happened when the report card came home. Let's think about what happened when you heard about what happened in school today. Let's think about which famous college did you get into? You've been telling kids for 15 years, you should have innovation and freedom, but you better get an A and you better not get in trouble, and on and on and on. That we spend decades indoctrinating people into being cogs in an industrial system called school. And then they get out and we say, oh, now we want you to innovate, but also please don't fail. Well, why are you surprised that people don't want to do this? And, halfway through my juggling lessons, half the people leave because they're not enrolled in dropping the ball. They just can't handle it. And if you actually want to undo 20 years of indoctrination, please expect that it will take more than an afternoon. And you have to find little tiny places where people can gain the confidence and the skill to make small failures. And if you're giving them a script to read and a spec to match, well, that's what they're going to do. Yeah.
And for me, I have 6 kids, so we're trying to encourage the effort, not the outcome. Celebrate the pursuit. I was just with my 10-year-old daughter. We were doing a high ropes course. She was afraid of heights, and we wanted to tackle it together. And it was nothing I had to do to her. It was just a curiosity and encouragement, and that was a great step. And keep going. And anyways, I think we need to encourage those courageous moments. Well, Seth, our time has flown. The audience was very engaged. I loved it. So in closing, next month, we will be joined on Authors at Drucker by Karen Dillon, who wrote a book and co-authored it with Clayton Christensen, the late Clayton Christensen, called How Will You Measure Your Life? It's a fantastic book, and it will cause you to question how you're spending your time, and in a very good way. So, Seth, so grateful for you making your time, and so grateful for all of you that joined us today, invested this time with Seth and I, and make it a great day. Go pursue something significant.
Go make a ruckus, everybody. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Seth.